Because I want everybody else to hear.
About these
Well,
various subjects.
Yeah,
Because both of you attended also.
well,
Oh, wait a minute.
Shannon wasn't at the,
No. I went to the other,
Yeah,
which was also very good.
Well, we can have a discussion tonight, if you'd like. And we'll still make progress.
all right, well, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. It's 7:12 PM. We do not have a quorum yet, and that's why we're starting a little late. We've been hoping to get two of our members in. Roll
Molly Angelbaum, Lisa Kaufman,
here,
Matthew Johnson,
running late, hopefully coming.
hopefully. Dan Crisco informed us that he'll be absent for today, and then Shannon Strathern.
Here.
Okay, very good. We can't vote on anything until we have quorum. But the agenda as it appears, do we have any comments on it?
No.
Okay, I think one thing is that I'd like for us to discuss under 3 relevant reports on relevant actions by town council. Our mayor, Mr. Smith, is here to fill in on that portion, but also I'd like us to discuss the VDOT meeting that we had last week with 2 members from the planning commission and 2 members from town council and then town staff. So we'll be having that discussion on number 3. Otherwise, I have nothing else to add to this. Review and approval of past minutes. We can't vote yet. But thank you for getting us these. And I did want to add some things. Ready? Okay, June 5th. Yay! June 5th, we had a discussion about homestays, but we wanted the council to chime in on that. Because what it says here is that we decided we don't require inspections for homestays, and yes, I agree that we said that, but the reason is that we've not required it on any other buildings. So town council wanted us to review homestays and look at inspections. So what I'd like to know is from council if he thinks that inspections are required for homestays. And if any.
Memory is correct, we discussed it briefly, but really no action came out of it. Maybe we could broach the subject again. And maybe that be a little bit more productive.
Well, if you feel that you've discussed it already and he didn't feel the need for us to do anything, then that's fine, because I mean, if there was a suggestion that we should be mandating inspections, then
We do have ordinances that say you have to have a fire inspection and a health inspection if you're going to provide transient occupancy.
I've never seen us do that.
So maybe then,
I can't imagine that Chester and Meadows got away with not having some kind of inspection.
And Albemarle does have its own set of those same inspection requirements.
Yeah.
so maybe it's a discussion about enforcement rather than policy. And that feels a little bit more comfortable for staff to follow up on
Okay.
outside of a meeting.
Yeah, because I can see that on an actual like hotel, like an actual, building but the short-term lodging, like owners using their house doesn't, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen us asking. Okay, so it's an enforcement issue. So if we're enforcing that on the short-term lodging, should we be requiring it for homestays? So then that's the question. So find out from council what he thinks.
Okay.
But are we, like, is anybody, like, in
No.
your experience
No.
with Airbnbs?
No,
Right, so,
so it's an enforcement issue.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure that there's ordinance in place that says you have to have these things, but then, I don't know.
Some degree we have researched it. I think in the end, it might just be seeing how much interest town council has in ordinances about homestays. To be frank with you, I'm not really sure, especially since we haven't had any. But I think maybe a productive thing would be me checking in on questions of enforcement and then kind of being an advocate for Scottsville, because as Matt has said, we don't handle fire inspections, we don't do our building codes, Albemarle, who reviews that for us. They're pretty communicative, but this might be one of those. Transit occupancy is one of those,
Mm-hmm.
a new frontier for local government in general. Everybody's trying to figure out what to do with it,
Right.
us included.
So then would we be suggesting that all of the existing Airbnbs are then checked to make sure that they have all of the health and safety?
Maybe not.
I think that's a
Regulations?
lawyer
They have to renew
question.
their license with the town.
But who's doing that? Who does the enforcement?
The county.
Yeah.
I think these are questions for the lawyer.
I
Okay,
think I think it's approaching more into staff work.
right, okay.
Rather than recommendations coming out of a planning. commission.
Okay,
Towards
so,
town council.
so then
Okay.
can we amend the minutes on 4A for the June 5th meeting to say planning commission recommends discussing with council to see how to handle existing cases, enforcement issues, and whether council believes homestay should have the same regulations as the other short-term lodging.
Okay.
And regarding short-term lodging, is there a distinction in his eyes in enforcement when it comes to established buildings like High Meadows and Lumpkins versus somebody renting out their house?
Clear me up on something, both of these sets of minutes say, regular meeting, one says Monday, June 5th, is that correct, and the other one's July 3rd?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's fine, I was just had a grading freeze there.
I had the same thing, because of J and J.
Can you clear up, like, what is the difference between a homestay and like an Airbnb?
So homestay literally is your own house
Right,
that you're renting out,
yeah,
or you're renting a portion of it out.
right,
So it could be your basement, it could be a spare bedroom, whereas. And so that's what the county and the city of Charlottesville define as homestay, but your short-term lodging is usually not the place that you are living in as a homeowner.
okay,
It
but
could be
both
like-
can be Airbnbs.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, so
right.
Airbnb is,
I was just wondering if there was a separate distinction between a homestay and Airbnbs, but
no, Airbnb could be a part of,
right,
or homestays could be a part of Airbnb.
okay, thank you.
The other thing is for B, regarding VDOT and the East Village subdivision application, we did have a question about whether we have to, if we get to approve the final plat. And I think the answer is yes, because it's subdivision and it falls under our purview, but it's also, so yeah, I think the answer is yes, but we wanted to just get clarity on that and make sure that it does come before us when the time comes. I'm sure the developer would want to know that too.
Okay.
Under new business 5A. I mean, that was such a huge portion of the meeting, but it only takes up a little tiny section of the minutes, which is fine. But is it worth noting that we discovered that Scottsville's missing from the crossroads designation and maybe we want to advocate with the county to get us included because we started that conversation 2 months ago.
Mhm.
So do we want to note that and change the minutes to reflect that in some way?
We could amend it. To include that.
I think it would be nice for the historical purposes to raise that in the minutes so that we can make sure, you know, we know that we've started this dialogue and when we started the dialogue. Other than that, I have no other comments on the June meeting. And I don't think I have any comments on the July meeting. Thank you.
We could put it as an agenda item for next month. If that feels easier. Or. You could have an approval, with the minutes amended as discussed. I took notes on what we discussed.
When is the next Albemarle County meeting coming up? Isn't that soon? That-
It is, I believe it's on the 8th.
Okay,
Personally, I'm fine with the minutes being adjusted and approving it with the adjustments that we just mentioned, but it's not my motion.
I move to accept the minutes as amended.
oh wait, we haven't,
Oh, not
Well,
fit.
do we need to like do anything
Oh, yeah,
official
good
to actually
point.
establish a quorum?
okay, yeah, good call. We do have official quorum
Okay.
now. Commissioner Johnson, thank you. So we can now take action to vote. And we're on agenda item number 2. Oh, do we agree to the agenda?
Yes,
Do we need a motion for that?
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
I move to approve this evening's agenda.
second,
All right, all in favor?
I
Okay, very good. All right. Minutes.
I move to approve the minutes as amended,
Second,
Second.
period.
very good. All in favor?
Aye.
I
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Stupid town business.
Report on relevant actions by town council. Mayor Smith?
The main thing that we've got going right now is trying to define what Kevin Quick's RVs are actually doing a suitable definition for these things. They're hybrid RVs. Going back to the ordinance question, when we had a public hearing on that last month, I mentioned that we do have ordinances for health and fire inspections, and he seemed to be good with that. He didn't seem to have any problem.
Good.
Which right now we're trying to find out exactly how to classify these things, because they're not self-propelled. You have to haul them in and set them on blocks. And my point, the one point that I made was that even though the adjoining landowner to wherever wants to put these things is in agreement with everything, if we don't nail down a definition of what kind of RV goes there, and he sells Kevin his land and is approved for RVs. We have those very big giant things that go to the KOA campground pulling in there.
Well, the way that it left planning commission was with certain parameters. So I feel like you would be okay if you kept those.
and it was just the 3 of them that we
Right.
approved.
It's just three, but we're trying to figure out what to call it. Everybody on council, including myself, thinks it's a good idea. But
Wouldn't they be manufactured home, like manufactured tiny homes?
We're working on that, and that's gonna take up most of our work session next Monday, and Mr. Bowling has already weighed in on it.
Okay.
What were his comments? What were his comments on the topic?
Well, I have to go back with the emails. I don't memorize everything he
Sure.
says.
And the health and safety is, I mean, that would still apply regardless of whether it's short-term logic or not. So as long as it meets those criteria, is that still up for question? What? It-
So part of it is technically 3 RVs or 3 mobile homes is a mobile home park here. That, to your question, Matt, that was the one point I took away, just to discuss what definition it is. Last Friday, I spoke with the Alamo County Service Authority. Another question I had was, they usually don't hook up to RVs, but they seem agreeable to this. And then I checked on capacity for 3, what process they would have, and they're gonna approach it with the same diligence that they do a mobile home or a home. But knowing that it's in kind of this gray area. And then I'll follow up with a little bit more staff work that you'll probably hear us report out on town council. I think we just want to make sure we do it correctly, and I just want to make sure I'm being diligent and dotting every I and crossing every T. Since that's kind of what I was indicated when I was brought on to follow up with this type of work. So those were some of the questions floating around. We'll have more in a week.
Okay. Anything else from town council?
No, but just on for your G Whiz file, I talked to Charlie Armstrong of Southern Development the other day, and they have just about completed everything they need to complete with the county to get Bird Street going.
Oh,
Wow.
I'm really excited about property over here. And they're ready to go on that too.
Really?
Yeah, he's all excited about this. And I told him or mentioned to him that when we do surveys, ever since I've been involved with this, what's your number one want for the town is a dog park. So we had a really good discussion about Southern taking part of the property in the triangle between the 2 roads and the plant and making a dog park.
Oh, that's
Kind of
nice.
gift to the community, so we have an amenity to their partners.
Okay.
He was real favorable on that.
That's really good
Nice
to
see somebody
hear.
playing ball.
Yeah, that's really
So,
nice.
see what
Okay.
happens.
Interesting. Okay, great.
That's positive.
I do think that's a wetland,
It is, but
Yeah,
that's
true.
perfect though.
And
but you
Unless-
have to,
ish.
if you have to mitigate the impacts on wetlands. So,
Right.
yeah. I could talk to Luke about it. but-
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah,
Okay, well,
but I'm
something
excited about it.
to keep in mind.
Are they gonna try to develop that area back there as is, like as their,
I don't know, I haven't seen any plans, he just said they're really working on it,
okay,
they're really excited about this.
yeah, I was just wondering if they'd be interested in applying for a special use permit to talk about density versus
Well,
keeping,
yeah,
I
we're,
don't know if anybody had heard
We'll see
anything,
what they come up with.
yeah. Okay,
okay, matters from the public. Is anyone online? No one is present in person.
Let me check again, just check a moment ago. No one's online.
Okay. Matters from the public closed. I'm sorry.
oh, Ron's sitting in for Eileen and Dan. You're filling in for 2 people.
Old business, comprehensive plan. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. We just missed the VDOT update. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so we met last Monday with engineers and staff members, including also a planner. 2 engineers, with 2 council members, and 2 planning commissioners. To discuss, essentially more at a high level. VDOT's interaction with the town of Scottsville, and then, see what discussion we could have, starting partially related to the comp plan, and then also about concerns and what kind of relationship Scottsville wants with VDOT. I think the biggest takeaway for me was a suggestion about us working in this and finding a direction on what we want for our comprehensive plan in regards to road safety, regards to, sidewalks, regards to pedestrian needs. And then a discussion about, a recommendation about, well, about, continued collaboration with Albemarle and the county, just due to the structure of how grants work in the state of Virginia with VDOT. What the hour, I think was about 3 hours, the meeting? 2.5 hours?
2 hours.
2 hours.
Well, I think we ended up
Maybe
talking
it felt
longer.
Um, What else would you add? Like,
Well, I think most importantly, in the short term, they agreed to have quarterly meetings with the town of Scottsville.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're gonna have
Regular point of contact,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they also suggested that someone from Scottsville join the monthly meetings with Albemarle County.
Hmm.
So this is one way we can engage with the county more thoroughly.
Mhm, mhm. When they said that, was that like a VDOT meeting with the county?
Coordination.
Okay, okay.
So the county planners talk about their concerns, much like what we did here. And, they talk about safety issues and long-term planning issues,
Mhm,
I suspect.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, so because the county is so big, they have a monthly meeting with VDOT, but they don't think we need to, and I don't think we need to either, so we agreed to quarterly. We thought that was a good number.
Yeah.
so that'd be separate, that quarterly.
Yes,
From that.
but also participating in the monthly meeting with Albemarle County. So,
Chief Jenkins also doing that. I thought that was very positive. We talked a lot about safety issues.
Mhm.
For instance, next to Dollar General, there's something area in the road that when I left town, I did see that area, there's standing water there.
yes.
We talked about the bamboo area along Valley Street
Hmm.
and several intersections in terms of safety. We do have some funds available, but those are mainly geared towards urgent safety issues with intersections. So ours might not rise to that occasion yet.
Does it have to be intersections?
Well, yeah, you're right. It could be, for instance, that bamboo area. It's not really an intersection technically, but yeah.
What was
safety
the-
location.
Commentary on the bamboo.
Just a very steep slope and there's not enough side table to actually install guardrails.
Okay. Reasonable.
The other important piece that came out of it is we've talked about creative measures that were affordable that we could do. Like, for example, SCAN was trying to paint
Right.
the
The crosswalks.
but apparently you're not allowed to do that
Hmm.
on 20 because it's a major road.
Material. yeah.
So, yes, exactly. So you're not allowed to use certain calming techniques on 20. But one thing they said we could do is the sidewalk bump outs, which we should probably explore. So
Are we talking about like where we pushed, like when we did the hay bales?
yes, but actually build like a sidewalk that extends out a couple of feet so that you're on the sidewalk, but you can see a little bit further. I mean, that wasn't actually articulated, but I think that's my take on what it is.
Sure.
But VDOT does not have to come to town and walk through town with us and say, you should do this, this, and this. They don't have to do that. Although in the past, they have given us some suggestions, but what they really recommended we do is hire a consultant whose expertise is traffic and safety, and work with that group to figure out what the priorities would be and then work on grants from there. There's a lot of grants available,
Mhm.
but we would just have to apply for them. So the question is, when was the last time we've done such a study? And is there anything in that we can pull from rather than spend tens of thousands of dollars for a new study? There's the idea that we did have something just a couple of years ago. So Javier's gonna look back in his records to see if we have something. We did apply. Matt let us know back in October and November that he applied for a grant called GAP, which I forget what it's called now. But we got word that we did not get that grant. And so we're gonna spend some time opening that can of worms up again to figure out what it was that we applied for. And maybe perhaps why we didn't get it, and then figure out what to do from there.
Okay.
So we have a lot of homework that came from that meeting, but it was a really productive meeting. We got a lot from it. There's also a hotline. Is it a hotline or it's called 800-4 road, where you can submit maintenance requests if you need anything from VDOT.
Oh,
So if you have a pothole, if
It's like
you
that.
have a sign down.
so like that, what is it, Warren? Is it
Warren?
The one that goes all the way up to, Hatton and then Food Line,
Yeah.
so like the potholes there. kind of thing.
Oh,
No,
well, you can absolutely submit it. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
And
so
then
that
they'll-
would be there.
Yes, that would be the place to submit it, and then they'll prioritize
Okay,
whatever that means, but I think
Right.
they assess, and they talked about their processes a little bit for us, which was pretty interesting to hear. To figure out how they prioritize things, and they come up with their budget years in advance, and they know what areas need to be updated, the infrastructure, and what areas need to be updated and approximately when. So their approach was very scientific and budget focused and helpful for us to hear. But of course, if any issues come up, we should be submitting them. Not just that, but we also have a regional representative that Javier has access to if we need more specialized assistance. He knows how to get in touch with them.
okay,
So I think building a relationship might be worth attempting. Undersell it, but even the monthly and the quarterly, and then maybe working on, see if it could be an appropriate liaison to discuss.
Yeah.
I can take that on as staff work, but also, it's a decent opportunity to have also somebody else participate and kind of continue to build that relationship. And also to your point, it was also informative to us to also learn how do I put it? Based on what you said, where we fit in regards to VDOT and where we fit in regards to other counties and cities.
And so the two things that I'd like to focus on for next steps is figuring out who's going to attend that monthly meeting and the quarterly meeting. And I think it would be nice if there were someone from town who's dedicated to go to that monthly. If you have the capacity, great. I think it would be right up your alley, and I think it would be really good for you to be able to network and connect with the key players. But if not, then we should find somebody else, maybe someone from town council or the mayor who could do that.
And I think next work session, maybe discuss it, and even if it's a on-off, so we could have two people, whatever works with people's schedule. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, and if the meeting is monthly and you didn't attend it every single month and you alternated, I think that's fine. But definitely the quarterly meeting for us would be really important. So that should be a consistent person and probably two or more people.
Yeah, I think especially for a quarterly meeting, so that's on my to-do list. I thought that was the most interesting opportunity they offered us. Was quarterly meetings and kind of building that knowledge.
Yeah.
For us.
Yeah, it was really helpful for them to offer that. Maybe we should approach the quarterly meeting as having the same way we did it for the last week, 2 town council and 2 planning commission members.
that seems reasonable.
I think it's nice to have a lot of people at the table to participate, to make sure we're covering all the bases. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. And it doesn't even have to be the same 2 people. If it's quarterly, there's enough time between meetings that we'd probably be covering new business more than covering old business. So the continuity of people isn't as important. So it might be nice for everyone to get a chance to participate in that.
I don't disagree with that. It also helps prevent burnout. In any form.
Yes, absolutely. So the other thing that came from that is if the town can't submit applications to VDOT, and if applications have to come from the county, whose responsibility are the roads in our town? So I'd like to understand more about, Javier, I know we've talked about this, but I'm putting it on the record.
Yeah.
What is the responsibility of the county to our town? And I've talked to Mayor Smith about this, and this kind of changes over the years, depends on who's in power, and it depends on who's vocal in town. Some people don't want the county involved because they feel like we'll take care of it better, which is great, except for the fact that we don't have a budget to
Right.
really take care of everything we need. We're a town of 500 people, and our infrastructure supports such a larger population that we cannot afford to budget for everything we want in our town. So there's talk of putting a property tax on, adding a property tax for the town. But I don't know. I mean, I have concerns about that, and I think if money is going to the county already, let's make sure that we're part of how that money gets spent, and let's not say, well, we'll take care of it on our own when there's money out there for us to get and
That's the right
access.
first step, and then approach a property tax after we figure out what the
I
land
think
is.
so, but I'm not working on the budget, so it's easy for me to sit here and say that. But, for example, the county is supposed to be responsible for our emergency services, police, fire, rescue. And I mean, they should be responsible for our streets. What else? What am I forgetting? Oh, the courts, they're already taking care of our courts if we need to, But as it is, we have our own police department. And now there's been so much talk about grants and having to put up matching funds for sidewalks and improvements. We had to cancel that grant because we didn't have money. But again, if the county's supposed to be doing that, even if we manage it on our own and have the work done, I think we should still be talking to the county about getting funding and having them share some of that burden. So I'd like for this to be a town council discussion too. Can you take this back to the town council?
Back when you hear what streetscape one disaster hit. There was a lot of questions about sidewalks. I think, and I just came in on the tail end of that, and I moved to. But there's been an ongoing question forever as to who owns sidewalks. Are they VDOT sidewalks or are they town sidewalks? Because of the easement, it's VDOT road that runs down the middle of town. And they have an easement on either side of the road. Does the easement take up half sidewalk? Is that VDOT sidewalk responsibility? I think we were under the impression when we signed the contracts for Streetscape 1 that we're going to get new sidewalks. Linko came in and just patched. Place out here, actually down the street, that was new sidewalks. And then there was a lawsuit after that, and Barry Grove was the mayor, so he had to handle lawsuits, and he could not take it. They put $100,000 judge that people wanted to get against us because you got a contractor that comes in and puts the culverts in upside down so that they pop every tire that backs into it. The town bought, I don't know how many tires. John Snoddy took a grinder, went around town and grinded off the sharp corners of these culverts. It was couldn't take them back out of the ground and turn them over like we were supposed to be. That was the confidence of the people that were doing the work. So there was an ongoing question about VDOT versus town, who was supposed to do what where. And then he had Streetscape 2, that went off pretty good. But the reason there's no yellow line out of the middle of East Main Street is because it's too narrow. You can't have a yellow line. There's no street that is very good. There's little things like that.
But why did we do that then? Why wouldn't we build in enough room to have a two-way street?
Okay,
With an old historic street and with
right.
Main, and when it became paved at some point in time, and sidewalks came in at some point in time. Cars were a little smaller, and
It's all very ad
not
hoc.
that many cars maybe, and so it just,
Yeah, but when we did streetscape,
restate was. Mainly concerned with the street and the curbs and the gutters and not. Expanding or contracting the sidewalks.
okay, so the sidewalks didn't change on Main Street. Okay, because they changed on Valley they got wider,
Didn't change a whole lot.
yeah. Enough. All right, okay, thank you, so, understanding more about the relationship between the county and the town.
Mhm.
Thank you. All right, that was our report on relevant actions by town council and planning commission. Matters from the public is closed. Old business. Comp plan, Lincoln.
Okay, great. So tonight we have 60 slides, a little bit shorter than the last meeting. Oh, here, sorry. That's fine. Yeah, just right up here. Now, you can drag it in.
And snap at the top.
You can double click the taskbar. Should.
Nice.
And I'll do full screens at Control L. Yeah, right there. Okay. So today I suggest that we first talk about defining the comp plan priorities. We're talking about strategies and goals and so on and so forth. Then we talk about the comp plan report structure. We talked about this before, but I'd just like to gather all of our thoughts and move forward with that. Then community engagement, and lastly, institutional coordination. We've already talked about VDOT, but we have a few other meetings to cover. Just looking at next steps, talk about that again, but the next discussion together, maybe two planning commissioners and two town councils will be on the week of 14th of August. There is a town council work session that week, but I'd suggest maybe we could have a small discussion moving on some things. I'll propose an agenda for that at the end of the meeting, but our next planning commission meeting will be 5th of September.
And how long do we have you?
I can continue until the end of this year. Javier and I are discussing the time allowance for that. For me personally, it would be an average of 15 hours every 2 weeks. 2 weeks is a pay period, yeah. So that'd be about 7-8 hours a week, plus or minus, depending on what we're doing, yeah. As we finalize the plan and make it more mature, I guess we could say, it'll be a lot more writing and editing and map drawing and a little less discussion. I think we'll be more focused on production, I guess we could call it, yeah. And then also the formal meetings that are needed between the planning commission, the hearings, and also town council. That could take several rounds of meetings, depending on how much on the same page everyone is. Okay. So I'd also like to mention, Strassman and Johnson, we had our meeting on the 24th of July, it was a small group discussion here with Ms. Gill. And I thought it was a really positive meeting, so that's why I'm proposing to continue on with those.
Yeah.
It's just nice to sit around a table and talk freely about ideas. So a lot of this material is building upon those gains made. So what I suggest now is really looking at the structure of existing comp plan, goals and strategies. I'm sorry about the picture hanging there. Maybe you could. We were painting the office last week, but basically, the existing comp plan has 4 key areas: land use, historic, scenic, and natural resources, economic development, and developed community. And within those, there's 12 total goals, 31 objectives, and 115 strategies. So I was surprised, this is a lot of strategies. So just earlier today, I decided to look at, the area of land use, for instance, and maybe I'll move this down this way. So this is just the land use area, the first key area of the existing comp plan. You can see there's quite a few objectives and there's many strategies. So for instance, I was looking at goal number 2, the difference between objective 1 and 3. Objective 1 really looks at expansion, and then objective 3 really looks at preservation. So if we really look at it holistically, the objectives are not really, telling you which one is more important. They're just telling you, you should comply with objective 1 and 3 at the same time. So that can be challenging if you're reading a comp plan, especially if you weren't involved in the process, like most of us were. But of course, I'm not trying to pick on any previous document. We're just trying to learn from those documents and move forward and create an update to the comp plan. But just looking at the AC 44 structure, they also use a linear process, I would call it, from left to right. You set your vision at the top, then you set your goals, then your objectives to the right, and then your strategies filtered from that. So it's a very linear process, and it doesn't really consider how many principles might be interrelated, and how you can consider balancing different priorities. So I have this proposal of this weaving approach. You could also call it a matrix approach, of really looking at different principles that we have as underlying in these vertical goals. And in this way, we could potentially better understand the linkages between the principles and also the linkages between the goals. And we could focus on prioritizing certain aspects on a case-by-case basis. So for instance, for goal number 1, you could say that principle number 2 is the most important. Principle number 1 is secondary, and then third most important is principle number 3. And this can have positive, negative aspects to it. It does become complex in its own way, but you can break it down, in my opinion, a little bit more straightforward. And I'll show you in subsequent slides how we can approach goal 1. We look at it, principle 1, 2, 3, goal 2, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. So this is a proposal today, and I'd just like to hear your approach and comments. And we also talked about it on the 24th of July.
So will we be assigning priorities A, B, C to our goals and principles?
When my proposal would be, today we talked about what these 3 principles might be, if there are 3. We talked about these goals, what they might be, there might be 4. And then we can start to attack, the principles first. We write about the principles, and then we look at our goals and how do we see our goals in those principles. And through that process, I'll give you an example in a few slides. For instance, a tire factory is an easy example. But
Great. I'm glad you think it's easy.
from a distance, after several months, it looks a little easier from a distance. Okay, so just to remind us, the typical process of governing the fiscal town. So you'd start with the strategic plan, which is recently confirmed by the town council, which is really a vision, just a document. And then from that, we filter certain things down to the comprehensive plan. That's really governing the fiscal environment. And from there, after town council would approve, then the zoning ordinances would be updated. And that's where the rubber really hits the road in terms of implementation. So thinking about, how can we update these goals, strategies, so on and so forth for the new comp plan, I started looking at the old comp plan on the left and the new strategic plan on the right. And I started to pick out keywords. I had already thought that the term character is very important for the town. So I highlighted everything having to do with character. It's often mentioned as small town character. I also highlighted everything having to do with protection and everything having to do with growth and development. Okay. So you can see in the strategic plan, the strategic plan also has these different aspects. I don't think Councilor Morse was really focusing on this when she was writing the strategic plan, but I think it has a lot of these same attributes. So I went through our comp plan, area by area, and I started highlighting these key terms like I mentioned. And I started to see that there's a lot of color mixing. So even within the same goal, there might be 3 colors. And for instance, goal number 2 is focused only on one color, so on and so forth. So then today I put this here because I started reading preserve, protect, and enhance the town's attributes. So flip to the next page. Preserve, protect, and enhance the historic heritage. So there is a lot of repetition in some areas. I'll just go back. So that's why I started to think, wow, if a lot of these different principles are ingrained throughout all these goals, then maybe we need to draw them out separately instead of just mentioning them bit by bit in every single goal. So you can see here, this is just a mix of different colors here, but predominantly the preservation and protection. And the economic development is a little more, bluish. But still, this small town character kind of pops in and out throughout the different goals. And then the developed community, it has two blues. Last week I only had one blue, but I read it again. I added this one. But you can see there are not any other colors here. So I could interpret this as maybe the different areas. And this is area number 4. They're kind of unbalanced in their approach to these different principles. So that's why I'm proposing that we really take a look at those 3 ideas, those 3 principles. So how do we see these principles together with the new strategic plan? So I sent around the strategic plan that was approved by council. This is just a screenshot of their 6 different priorities or objectives. The term priorities and objectives they're kind of interrelated. They're used interchangeably. But another page I was looking through today, I found really useful for the comp plan is really talking about strategic assets. So you can see here the strategic assets are in the middle. So we have tangible assets on the left and intangible assets on the right. But what I noticed, almost every single one of these has to do with a physical thing or a physical place. So I think it's really relevant to the comp plan. And these are assets, which is generally a positive thing for the town. And I think we should often refer back to this to double check, are we considering different aspects, for instance, physical attributes or services to the community like the museum? Are we considering farmers market, so on and so forth? So now really comparing the relationship between the 2018 comp plan and the new strategic plan, I have a question mark here. It's never going to be a direct relationship. We can't really compare apples to apples. But I think we can really still analyze the strategic priorities and think about how does it relate to our comp plan process. So this is another exercise that we did on the 24th of July together. I thought was really useful. So we looked through the strategic plan and we classified each of the goals, if they have a direct connection with the comprehensive planning process, an indirect connection, or really a underlying connection. Underlying connection is kind of a new terminology I'm using because I think there's still some relevance here, and I'll explain why. So going through each objective and its goals, the first one was promote sound governance practices. Okay, improve information availability. So that's not really directly relevant to the comp plan, or it's not physical. But I think there is an underlying connection. I mean, we want to make the comp plan accessible to everyone on the website. Just like number two, improve outward communications, we want to be able to let people know about the comp plan, so that's another underlying connection. And then goal number three, build financial capacity. That's an indirect connection, we have to be able to pay for the improvements of the comp plan, whatever is proposed and so forth. Foster smart growth is the most relevant to the comp plan, obviously. So housing is really a direct connection to the comp plan. Community services. This could be read both ways, direct or indirect. The way that it's written in the strategic plan right now, it's a little bit more about social services, but still you need facilities for social services, so on and so forth. And then the last is prepare future growth scenarios. So that's really the nuts and bolts of a comp plan. Number three, tourism and the economy. Talking about short-term lodgings, of course, we talk about a lot about that here, so that's a direct connection. Promote town identity, not, especially fiscal, but in some regards, it's important for the comp plan. And then the business space, tourism business space, so on and so forth. We have to consider the amount of commercial space in town, for instance, if we have enough space for a hotel, for instance. So I think that's an indirect connection. And cultivate community connections, strengthen community engagement. Of course, that's not something we put in the comp plan, but it's something we really want to, follow and ingrain in the comp plan. So that's an underlying connection. Increased walkability, very important for the comp plan so far. Natural environment, preserve the local environment, really direct. Park accessibility, it's a little bit more indirect. Local events, you need facilities for local events, so that's an indirect aspect. Number 6 is promote accessibility awareness. So accessibility is can wheelchairs make it in and out of buildings? That's a more micro consideration. Or can people walk up and down Valley Street? That's a larger scale consideration, like accessibility in terms of sidewalks and trails. Advocate for animals and wildlife. The most physical example of this in that document is dog park, and we've heard already about a dog park. So I think that is relevant to the comp plan in some ways. So it's an indirect connection. So overall, I think this was a really fruitful exercise, and it's most useful for prioritization. You don't have to think about every single thing related to the comp plan, but some things are most important, some things are indirectly important, and some things are just underlying and great. Okay, so tallying this up just like we did on the 24th of July together, there's 6 direct connections, 7 indirect, and 3 underlying. So I started thinking about how does this factor into our meeting process? So how does this also compare to these terms that might be these underlying principles? So we're talking about character, we're talking about protection, but I think one of the most fruitful aspects that came out of our discussion on the 24th, Mr. Strasser, thank you so much for this, was maybe converting this to the idea of stewardship. And the stewardship is a more inclusive term, in my opinion. And I just looked up the definition on the internet, and we're really talking about management and the town entrusting
That's perfect.
that to the comp plan and to the beneficiaries of the town. So character, stewardship, and growth, I think personally are really strong underlying principles. But again, they don't really directly relate. I think that's okay, but we can talk a little more about how does that factor into the leading approach. So here are those 3 terms. Okay, so let's say we wanted to have principle number 1 is retaining character. We could wordsmith these more, of course. Principle number 2, fostering stewardship, and principle number 3, enabling growth. So these are those 3 words kind of translated into these action terms, you could say: retaining, fostering, enabling. Okay, and then let's say we wanted to kind of build out these pillars or goals, as we call them here. So on the 24th, which is again really fruitful discussion, we talked about infrastructure. So from that discussion, I kind of adjusting these terms slightly. So. This would be potentially build out infrastructure. So what we learned at the VDOT roundtable, we have to prioritize safety. So how would we consider that in this structure? So, we could think about different scenarios. So let's say, widening Valley Street downtown. So that could have some impacts on the character of the downtown. Maybe not as important for fostering stewardship, but we'd have to consider sidewalk accessibility, curb bump outs, so on and so forth.
Well, and sometimes infrastructure could affect wildlife and resources, natural resources, so that could be a negative impact if we're not careful.
Exactly. For instance, if we were talking about a project that was affecting the Antique Nature Preserve. So this one would be much more important. Downtown, widening Valley Street just downtown might be a little less important for the nature, but a little bit more impactful on people, for instance. And then the third principle, we'd have to double check, this is a process of scenario planning. So how would building out the widening Valley Street downtown, how would that enable growth? Would it enable growth? Would it be good for the town, or would it be mainly for traffic passing through the town? So this is just a really quick example of how we could use this structure to consider different projects. So for instance, in the next goal, talking about housing. So from our discussion on the 24th of July, Ms. Strassner and I were walking up Town Hall, and we were thinking, oh, we didn't even talk about housing that night. So I added housing as one of the 4 goals here that we could potentially talk about here in the meeting process. So, again, we can wordsmith this a lot, enable housing choices. We could also put enable housing affordability. We could also put enable housing accessibility, but I think accessibility has more to do with handicap ramps of housing, so on and so forth, in my mind. But just starting off with this, enable housing choices, retaining character. So we could think, would a housing development, for instance, on Bird Street impact the character of the town? How would it impact the environment? How would a housing development on Bird Street enable growth? Then another example is create community connections. And we talked a lot about this on the 24th. We wanted a term, we were searching for a term that was a little bit more than just walkability. And walkability could also be a principle. Walkability is kind of an idea, just like enabling growth, stewardship, and character. These are, I guess we can say, more principles or ideas. And these are more creating physical things. So create community connections. We're talking about sidewalks, increasing walkability and increasing chance encounters with neighbors. For instance, when you're walking your dog, you're able to walk your dog more easily when there's a sidewalk, and you can chit chat with your neighbor and not worry about getting, run off the road by a truck pass. So that's just a quick example of some ideas we were thinking. If you have anything else to add based on the conversation, please jump in. So the last goal was really demonstrating the value and having physical well-being of the town. So, and this is maybe the least fiscal or thing here. It's a little bit more ephemeral, but demonstrating the value. I've often heard during our discussions here that the town is at the corner of Albemarle County, but it really serves the region. So how can the town demonstrate its value to the 12 to 15,000 people that I've heard live in this region that come to town for services? So I was thinking that maybe the town could work with the UVA, maybe the economics department, to do a study, maybe a free study, of demonstrating this value. So the town can go to Albemarle County and say, hey, look at what the town services. Not only Albemarle County in this corner, but we actually service people all the way up to the growth belt, for instance. And we could do the same for Buckingham and also Fluvanna, of course, demonstrating that value regionally for the town, not just for this small corner of the county. The second aspect of this would be fiscal well-being. Fiscal is really the financial terms for a jurisdiction. But this could consider and or potentially recommend that the town really focus on implementing a real estate tax or other revenue change to support the recommendations of the company. So that could be considered in this column. These are a little bit less fiscal, like I mentioned. They're a little bit more about studies and ideas and finance. Okay, so I have this question up here in the corner. We've talked a lot about goals, strategies, principles, areas, so on. There's a lot of terms floating around. So I think what I suggest we move forward with this idea of weaving, if that's possible, and the ideas of principles and goals. But I think as we refine it, I just want to double check, that we're all on the same page of what is a goal and what is a principle, and are we using the right terminology, and would the things underneath this, the things that are at these intersections, would those be strategies? So I think that's something to consider. Maybe we talk about that at our next small work session. Okay, so then relation back to the strategic plan. So Councilor Morris was talking to me a couple days ago, and she was really suggesting tying this back to the strategic plan. But she understands that not everything will be directly relatable, but it is a good exercise, I think. And it's kind of double checking themselves. So while she was talking about that, I was kind of doing a little sketch. So these underlying connections, the information availability, our communication, community engagement, these are those underlying things that are kind of like sitting here in the corner relating to everything, kind of the foundation here. Then we have direct connections. For instance, we talk about housing that relates here, build financial capacity. So that's indirect. You can see that right is rather direct, indirect is a little bit lighter red over here. So it's just kind of a double check that we're considering everything that the strategic plan is considering. So if someone from the planning commission wanted to kind of do that double check, and during the double check, if you have other ideas, someone could write those down, and we talk about them at the next work session. I think that would be really fruitful, looking at it through different eyes, not only me doing it, but other people doing it, and kind of double checking the process. But I'll just put this as a placeholder. Maybe we can talk at the end of the meeting about this. I think it would be a really fast exercise. Actually, you can put it on a slide. So, moving on to the second agenda item that I proposed here in the presentation, confirming the comp plan structure. I just wanted to, recap our previous discussion regarding the structure of the existing comp plan. We already, talked that it's a long document. The goals, objectives, and strategies are extensive and really fine-grained, hard to interpret potentially, and the maps are really hard to read. So how can we kind of learn from these observations when we make the new comp plan? So again, this is kind of what we learned on the 5th of June meeting. So I just want to bring these forward again and talk about them and hopefully confirm them so we can move forward. And what I'll do, I'll implement this in our Word document that we share, and then you can see how it looks. So what I would suggest is we do have the executive summary. We have the preface, which really includes the forward, the introduction to the comprehensive planning process, really talking about why we're doing it. Then we talk about the profile of Scottsville. And as you might remember, the existing comp plan breaks the profile of Scottsville into 2 different chapters. So I would suggest we condense these here. So it's really looking at A, the history, and then B, the planning background. There could be more bullets here, but these are the existing areas that are in the document right now. Then we have the principles, goals, and strategies. And then we have the implementation plan. So the guidance, and that's also doing the Virginia state requirements. For instance, having the transportation study here and how will we comply with that, so on and so forth. And then the future land use plan. And then there is an existing appendix for a zoning summary. So that's just condensing all of these recommendations in comp plan and how it impacts zoning. So when the planning commission does go about implementing this in the zoning code, this can be the first reference. So another piece of feedback that the commissioners had for the 5th of June meeting was there's a lot of public assets in town. Some of these are mentioned in the reader of the comp plan right now. Why not intersperse these throughout the document as kind of like box stories? You know, they could be a quarter of a page, half a page. When we're talking about key idea for, let's say, parks, under, you know, natural resources, we can talk about Van Cleef, for instance. When we're talking about connection to the river, we could talk about Canal Basin Square and the levee system. So this is, I think, a really key piece of feedback that we received from 5th of June, and I think it's really good. And the great thing about it is these are quite modular. Some of these are already written, we just need to update them. And you know, different planning commissioners or other interested people from the community can actually, you know, write a section that we don't have, and then we can kind of workshop it together. So that's the structure. If that makes sense, I can go ahead and start moving this around in the document. Okay. So we move on to the next part of the presentation, community engagement. Okay, so I'd just like to highlight that you know, the UVA team that I was on won the inaugural student project award for the APA Virginia chapter. So the event was in Roanoke on July 18th. And it was really an interesting event because there were 8 total project awards. Ours was the only student award. But if you look at the population of these different jurisdictions that won the project awards, the state of Virginia won one. They had 8 million people live in the state of Virginia. You know, then Fairfax won another one, and then Scottsville won with the least amount of people. So it just really speaks to resources. So I think this was really eye-opening for me. And of course, when we complete this comp plan process, we could submit for this, you know, award again, but not in the student category, in the professional category up here. And I think we could write quite a good proposal or project synopsis based on, you know, limited resources and you know, pulling together, you know, a lot of these towns have, you know, 10, 20, 100, you know, state of Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation might have 500 staff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's really amazing. So I think we should target for this. I think the submission is next March or April. So that could be a good way to highlight the work and also the method that we're using. I guess we would call this comp plan lights. You know, we have limited resources, but we're all tackling it together. Okay, so the award is here. We'll keep it here at the town hall.
Beautiful.
Okay, so basically we're now, I think, ready for our engagement and outreach sessions. So yeah,
Sorry.
we have
Oh, you got a
Wait, what about, yeah, so can we hear about the
survey.
survey? I feel like I'd like to hear about that first, if
Sure.
that's okay.
Okay, so basically the survey is live. I've already emailed everyone. The James Exchange just published it today, this afternoon, I believe. And let's see, there's an advertisement in Scottsville Monthly. I sent around an email, I think it was last night.
Mhm.
What's surprising, I'll show you the number of hits. I don't think it's really very successful in Scottsville Monthly yet. But I was at the library this morning across the street, and the library had just received a whole stack of Scottsville Monthlies, so maybe they're being distributed now. We have QR code posters that Amelie has sent around town. I believe, Javier, right?
Yes.
So those are hopefully being used, and basically we're going to have the hard copy version for the town residents. The QR code posters are going to go to Airbnb, so I'll have to talk about how those are we're going to reach out to them. I think that was a town council suggestion if possible. And then Javier, we've been talking about the Baines incentive. Yeah. So that would be more hard copies plus the poster in Baines.
Have we posted stuff like this down at the farmer's market and the Boys and Girls Club and the post office and all those places?
Post office we have, farmers market, I'll hand that off to staff to do this weekend.
Okay,
And then Boys and Girls Club,
I go every day, so I can,
can you wait for?
I saw your son there this morning.
yeah.
He said hi to me.
Oh, thanks,
I'll hand you something before we.
Okay.
wrap up.
great.
And send one to scan. They have the
Mhm.
bulletin board downstairs at the,
I can't remember if I
Twin
told
bricks.
Stevie and then hand it over. I'll slide something under the door.
And I can post at the Esmont, at
Oh,
Yancey
yeah,
and the post office out
We
there.
hand you a few.
Okay.
You can get
and the
creative.
brewery.
Yeah, and the
Yeah,
brewery,
brewery
yeah,
for
for sure.
I have Nancy on that right now.
Okay,
She's up.
perfect.
She's volunteering also, so
Does Tavern on the James have a bulletin board? I think they do, right?
They do.
Mhm.
I didn't know that, so I'll do that one.
Okay, so here are the responses. So the survey started being sent out, I think publicly on the 23rd. So you can see there's a spike here. The Scottsville Monthly came out right about here online. So we might start to get another uptick there.
What was the
What was
spike on
that?
the 27th?
27th, let's see, Nancy distributed,
Tuesday,
but not
Wednesday?
to the
No.
James Exchange, I can't remember where it was.
I can't figure out if it was. Maybe Facebook, I'm not sure.
So that is Nancy. That bar right there is Nancy.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I know it was only like 10 days ago, but time flies, yeah.
Well, the town,
That's good.
when did the town put it on their website? Cause that got shared on Facebook and
I
the
shared it on
Scottsville
Facebook.
page.
It might have been then, around, it would have been around then, I
Mhm.
can't remember when. And then following the day that Lincoln published it,
Okay.
I put it up on Facebook.
Can you push that out again? Cause it's nice to have that repetition.
Yeah.
So it goes on top of everything.
Yes,
It's-
yeah, and also it's nice to do a call to action and tell people to share it on their own Facebook pages.
Yeah, I can see if we can share it on the Scottsville Elementary School page.
Nice, that would be
So,
wonderful.
yeah,
So just looking at the
Wow,
first 38, you know.
wow.
Oh my
these
God.
people living in town, these people, coming periodically to town. And there's one lady from Delaware. That's on the responses. That's great, yeah.
Thank you, lady
Yeah.
from Delaware, that's awesome.
But this is surprising. I mean, I thought we'd have more here, a little bit less here, but yeah, overall, it's coming along. Where do you
When-
work?
Sorry, could I ask, when do we plan to close this?
So our original intent was to have it open for 1 month. But based on the current process, excuse me. We would close the summer around August 24th, which is the start of school, basically, I know Charlottesville.
Yeah,
So, I think we might want to keep the subscription for a month and a half.
mhm,
Two months is the subscription amount. So what I suggest we revisit it at the next planning commission meeting. Well, I'll have all the results analyzed then, and then we can make the final determination. Do we need more information? Do we want to make any other pushes? Or do we have enough and we close it and we need to move forward? Because I think that's right. Next planning commission meeting on the beginning of September is right before we hit 2 months on the subscription. We haven't had the survey open that long at that point, but it'll be about a month and a half.
okay. We should post it at the Scottsville pool too. Yeah, a poster up there, and then maybe they'll even send out an email blast about it if I ask nicely. And John Snoddy is on the board, so as former mayor, maybe he'd like to, yeah.
But really looking at where people work, I'm glad that we added this kind of towards the end. I don't currently work, so that was actually substantial. there are a lot of people that work in the town of Scottsville, yes, Albemarle, not a lot in Fluvanna. Buckingham, not yet, Charlottesville and others, and this is where the Delaware lady chipped in Delaware. And there's a few others that, chose not to say anything here. So I think this is fruitful. I mean, I'm surprised that Fluvanna is a little lower, but it is a land density county. Okay, so going back to the actual engagement events, this is what we've had on our list so far. Like I said, I was at the library this morning, and the library and another gentleman were working there. They're excited to host an event. I suggested maybe a coffee session. They've never done coffees before, but they consider that. I was asking if there's any book club we could piggyback on. They don't really have a book club meeting there very often, regularly. So this is really an open list. We have our posters. I'll put the other poster on a piece of foam cord, and if you remember, this is really the first engagement event while we're having a conversation with someone. They can put a sticker on where they live. So it could either be on the Scottsville scale or the county scale. Then we'd have, also a flyer that I'll have for whoever I go with to some of these events. Maybe I'll go with someone for the initial 3 events, and we can make it more organic after that. If the planning commissioner too wants to go to an event and meet people, they could go on their own, of course. So it's just about who we want to engage with first. And also there's the brewery, of course. I will mention that I tried calling the Scottsville School of Apartments several times at the Piedmont Housing Alliance office. They're not really responsive here, to me anyway. If anyone has any connections there, that might be fruitful. I did get a call from a lady from Fluvanna County this morning on the town phone. She was calling looking for housing, and she asked about looking for a nearby trailer park, because she's soon to retire. She doesn't have a lot of resources, and she was looking for recommendations. And I said, well, there's the Scottsville School Apartments, you could consider in contact with them. But yeah, this is a prime example. She was looking for basically a retirement home to kind of scout out for herself. And for instance, if there's available land in the northeast of the community, that could be, a great place for different types of housing, single family housing, but also for retirement type of housing, that could be really fruitful, I think, for the community. We could talk more about that when we're writing the housing recommendations for the comp plan. But I think this lady that called, she was really sounded like she was in a tight spot. She was really looking for housing because she knew she was getting old, and it's not a lot to look for in her price range in the area. So that really hit home talking to her. So however we want to approach these events, Saturday is coming. It's Saturday, for instance, we could go to the farmers market. And check my calendar, but I would be glad to come down for that.
Well, I think we have you for limited hours, so I'd rather use your hours a little differently.
Sure, yeah.
But we do need to come up with a sign up list.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I knew I was supposed to send out an email with a sign up list, so I will still do that. Okay. So the most important thing about this type of engagement is really understanding the different needs of the community and their concerns that they might not be able to capture in the survey. The survey is really fill in the blank, statistical, demographic information. So you can kind of gather information between the lines, I guess we could say. And another point is, we need to somehow capture that information. Let's say you talk to 5 to 10 people at this event in depth. And you don't have time to write it down. So what I suggest always is, right after the event, set aside some time to kind of sit down and write down what you learned. Because you always think, oh, that's so important, I'll remember that, but 2 or 3 days later, you don't sit down and write it down and you lose it. So I think that's template. Doesn't have to be long, just bullet points, and from that we can, really glean some important ideas from content.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I can reach out to Ed Brooks at the Yancey Community Center and see if he'll post something about the survey. And then also when we could set aside some time to have an outreach event out there.
Great.
Are you like, how long should I ask him? Like 1 to 2 hours? What's the ideal time frame?
Well, I know Yancey, they do have a lot of ongoing community events.
Yeah.
So I really think the idea of piggybacking on an existing event is the best way to go.
Okay,
Because if you just say, hey, I'm talking about a comp plan, come to the meeting room. There'll be 2 or 3 interested people. But if you go at a different type of event and people are wandering by, saying, wait, what is this poster? What are you're talking about? Then you can maybe get some really interesting insights.
okay,
I
And-
would
yep.
second that from Lincoln.
okay,
Any good community organizing, you always take advantage of events to lead up to it.
Okay.
It's a little bit tough to. It as a standalone event, sometimes it's a little bit tough to get people out, but
okay,
So what we can do, we can also print off a couple copies of the existing comp plan. When someone asks, what is a comp plan? And you can say, well, this is what it looks like now, but we're updating. So on and so forth. So I think it's just, hearing what people have to say and really prompting them on different questions about, housing, so on and so forth, things that we've been talking about. For instance, we can even, I could just print off a few pages with, our weaving approach, and not to necessarily show it to them, but, just to prompt questions in your own mind. If the person's, older in age, you can talk to them about retirement housing, so on and so forth. There are different questions about the community.
And will there be some sort of like visual for the table to hang a banner or something so that we look a little more?
Does the town have any banner where we could print off? We could print off the logo of the comp plan.
I could look for if we have a small banner. If not, maybe this is something from Sir Speedy. We could put together and then try to get something done.
okay.
I can look at it tomorrow, in the background.
Yeah, I mean,
If it's
even
like
if we just,
table, something you can just like drape over, yeah.
yeah, I mean, if we had, that'd be fantastic, but if not, maybe we can just print out a couple of pages on 8.5 by 11 and, have our crest or, I don't know,
So what we
the
do now-
logo.
I've set up tables before for outreach for comprehensive plan, so I can talk with Lincoln.
Yeah,
We can put something together, so you have you have that table. I already have a few ideas
Yeah.
trying to get into the details.
yeah,
Also, so you guys feel like you have something. Something to hold on to as you do it.
yeah, sort of like maybe bullet points if somebody gets stuck and needs some help on engaging.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll also reach out to the library and see at what events they have coming up that we could piggyback on.
Okay.
And the Scottsville soccer Sox is getting ready to start up.
Perfect.
So yeah, we could combine that with the farmer's market table. One of those Saturday mornings or a few of those Saturday mornings, there's tons of people out those mornings.
Okay, institutional coordination. So I'd just like to recap a few other meetings that we've had recently. So Javier and I met with the Fluvanna County Planning Director on the 17th of July. So we talked about a range of different items, and this was really a get to meet you Zoom with him. But we talked about the town boundary, which I'll show you an image of in Fluvanna County in the subsequent slide. Then we talked about the water and sewer services for any of the town sites in Fluvanna County. So the planning director was not familiar with any water sewer service. But Javier and I called the Albemarle County Service Authority, and they actually serve a few lots within Fluvanna. And this is not shown on the Albemarle County GIS, which shows that the ACSA territory and service lots.
Interesting.
And it's not shown on the Fluvanna side either, so it's like this blind spot.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It never even occurred to me to ask that question, if there's any water service in our Fluvanna houses.
Because it relates to the density allowable in our zoning, for instance. If you
Yeah.
have water and sewer service, you can have a certain number of dwelling units per acre.
So can Albemarle County Service Authority be available to any future development in our Fluvanna lots?
Well, we didn't. Basically, we talked to the Fluvanna County Planning Director, then we tried to contact them, but they weren't in the office or something, we left a message. But they immediately replied us about a planning application that we were, considering. And that's how we found out about the terminology of RVs.
Uh-huh.
Because Mr. Quick had contacted ACSA about connecting to the sewer line. So yes, his site has a sewer line in front. And was servicing the previous house, the house burned down. So that's how we've gotten this discussion about ACSA and that planning application. So this was actually a really fruitful discussion that we had. It started with Fluvanna.
Mhm.
So then we talked a little bit about Fluvanna's existing comp plan and then their current, update process. They're almost completed. It seems like they're gonna complete it in the next 2 to 3 months with final approval. But they're not really doing any substantial rewrites, it's just really using the same document and making some minor updates. So then we gave them an overview of Scottsville's comp plan process. And then they highlighted that, this planning application I emailed everyone about, this 250 cabins that is straddling the boundary between Fluvanna and Albemarle County is up for planning approval in both counties. And they did advise that Scottsville should consider, impact on taxes. For instance, meals tax could increase. You've got 250 cabins of people needing a place to eat on the weekends.
Are these rentals, like short-term rental cabins?
That's what I understand, yes.
Okay.
Scottsville is the closest town.
Yeah.
Area to that area.
Where are these?
It's about
The,
It was on Mount Ida,
the
mhm.
northeast here.
big section of Mount Ida.
Which is
Huh.
on both counties, so.
So, but I wonder if it's is it part of Mount Ida? Oh, okay, well then they'll be going there for the food and I would assume.
No.
I mean, why would you leave Mount Ida if you're staying there in a cabin?
But the planner did suggest, considering also fire and police services, because, if the county's not gonna. Be able to service the call, then Scottsville might have to assist. So those things were mentioned and do their recommendation to consider. Anything else to mention, Javier?
No, I think the most interesting was the third and then the fourth bullet point for us in regards to having a conversation back and forth.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'll show a slide again about their use of community planning areas and urban development areas. Yeah. Okay, that'll come in a few seconds. Another recent meeting we had was on the Jefferson Planning District, and it was on 31st of July. So it was Ms. Morris, Javier, and I. And basically, we were requesting assistance with the GIS map because they had helped the town previously to do the 2021 zoning map update. And we also were requesting potential assistance on housing, really understanding how Scottsville sits in the region, the demographics and, the idea of affordability here. What does that mean? So Christine, the director of TJPDC, basically said there's no clear affordable housing definition. There's not really one that's adoptable strictly by the county or by the Planning District Commission. We can look at the federal definition, so on and so forth. So this will be our next discussion on what is affordable. And sadly to say, they do not have any slides or any deck that's ready to present to anyone on the idea of affordability in the region. An idea we had was maybe they could have one of their housing specialists come here to give a 30-minute presentation to the town council and planning commission. There could be another 30-minute Q&A, so an hour total, really talk about housing here. They aren't able to support, unfortunately, first of all, because they don't have information prepared. And second of all, Scottsville is not one of the 6 stakeholder counties, including the city of Scottsville, of course. They're not one of the stakeholder jurisdictions that pay for TJPDC. So they're not really willing to assist.
Okay.
Plus we, of course, pay.
So again, does the county of Albemarle, are they a stakeholder?
They are.
Okay, so we need to think about leveraging our relationship with the county to make sure we're getting the services that we need.
Yes, so basically. They did send us the zoning map later that day in GIS format. I have to double check, open up the map and really look around. Javier and I have not been able to find this file, the 2021 file. I think we found a 2019 file here in the town records. So this is hopefully is the latest and very important for us. So this would be updated based on the recognition of the comp plan. And yeah, the bottom line is they really suggested requesting this from the counties. So I think Fluvanna, we already initiated that discussion and we have a good working relationship. For the county of Albemarle, it still needs to take off. I have to say, I have a slide on that in a few minutes. We already talked about VDOT, that was also on the 31st of July. So I thought that was a very positive meeting. Yeah. I was really surprised at how familiar 2 or even 3 VDOT officials really were. I was really impressed. They were really genuine. I was really impressed. Okay, so looking at potential next steps with Fluvanna is we really need to obtain the town boundary line in GIS from them, because I've located some potential inaccuracies in our zoning map boundary for the town in Fluvanna County. I'll show that on the next slide. We also need to request them to take those Albemarle County Service Authority layers for those few lots in Fluvanna and add them to their GIS. So there's not this so-called blind spot. We also potentially need to ask them to remove the duplicate zoning layer that they have for parcels within the town limits. I'll show a map of that. And we need to request clarification for their use of community planning areas inside Scottsville. I'll show a slide on that. We also need to kind of understand the language that they use here for urban development area, because county can't designate an area within a town as an urban development area without the town's permission. And we also, if the town wants to declare its own urban development area, we need to consult with the county. And the key term, I was just looking it up last night, consult is the key word. Consult does not say that we need to ask permission. So that's interesting. Okay, so visually highlighting this boundary issue that might be something we need to consider here. If you look at the historical plat map of the town, you can see that the boundary is very straight. It's perpendicular. You can see here that the zoning map in 2021 by the Planning District Commission, it's kinked or bent in 2 locations. So basically what I suspect they did, they found the boundary of one of the, I think it's just the overlay district, right?
Yeah.
Interest border, right? So they use that as the town boundary, because in the Fluvanna GIS here, you can see that in the GIS they have is quite straight. The director of planning did highlight that this is diagrammatic because, you know, of course, the boundary goes all the way to the county boundary. There's not that gap there, but we can get them that separately. So there is a potential issue here. And also, if you flip back and forth between Albemarle County lots and their GIS, the Fluvanna lots in Fluvanna GIS, it's a little bit different. And I'm not sure, but this might be worth considering because, for instance, you know, I started looking at this parcel here that we assessing planning applications for. And luckily, that's clearly within the town boundary, but if you were had a planning application for this lot, it might become a little bit of gray area. Could have some disputes. So that's why I suggest we look into this more in detail. So going on to the Fluvanna GIS, this is what you can see. So this pink area is their community planning area. You can see this gap here that we can ask them hopefully to kind of show a little more accurately. But yeah, ideally we can get this boundary line and load it into our file and it would be differently shown here more accurately. Okay, so as I think I mentioned in the previous meeting, there is some zoning by the county here. So this is zone B1. When in the town zoning, this is village residential. So just as we were talking about those 250 cabins, you know, straddling the two counties, they need to apply for planning permission from both counties. So for instance, if you were applying for planning permission for this parcel, you would have to apply for the town and the county, which makes sense, right? But if you're applying for this parcel, this one here, you wouldn't apply to the county, you would only apply to the town. But that's what's confusing. If you don't know the difference, you start looking at Fluvanna County GIS, like, oh, it's business one. It could create some confusion. So continuing on about the comp plan, yes, this is a community planning area. And it's covering that pink area is covering all of the town in that county. So one question is, should they be able to designate area within the town as a community planning area? Because they don't have any control over the planning. You know what I mean?
Right.
So going back, you know, this is all that community planning area. It runs out a little bit further, right? So that's another question that we might want to consider, because it is really conflicting priorities. Because if I'm a potential developer, do I look at the county comp plan or do I look at the town comp plan? So I think that the answer is you have to look at the town comp plan, except when you're a parcel that's on the edge. And then you know, this is that wider area. Okay, that community planning area. Okay, so the other thing, let me just go back to this list. About urban development area. Okay, so as I think I already presented last meeting, they use this language that says that, you know, basically this could be referred to as the community planning area, but sometimes it could be referred to as the urban development area. So Javier and I have been discussing, this is very fluid language, and some communities might use this to their advantage. So we could potentially learn from this also, but they shouldn't be using it inside the town boundaries. So that was Fluvanna. Now, Albemarle County.
Just a point about that, there might be some impact on like property taxes, for example. So maybe that's why they have that zoning classification, and maybe that's why they use the urban development area. I mean, it might have some impact if, I don't know.
Yeah, we could talk to them about that. And yes, they are really concerned about property tax because they did mention that when Mr. Quick's application, if it is approved, that we should inform them immediately because that will trigger the property tax to be changed.
Because it's
Is his in Fluvanna?
Yeah,
Okay.
So his,
Do we have an obligation to tell them if some use changes?
I think the property owner is to do that immediately. However, there is, you still have a feedback loop in case the property owner does not do that. Yeah, it's like a checks and balances. We could look into that and see if there's an official process for that.
Yeah,
It's
'cause I'm-
full interaction, because also you have a communication about changes on their side.
Yeah.
Back to our side.
Yeah, I-
Full communication like that has helped us out with both cases.
Oh, for sure. And I don't mean to sound like we shouldn't tell them if we don't have to. I'm just thinking through processes, because that wouldn't have even occurred to me. So if a house in the town is being used as short-term lodging, does that change the property tax and county designation? I mean, I don't think so, but in Kevin Quick's case, it might. Only probably because he's got a vacant lot, it's probably taxed at a lower rate because there's no improvements on it. Whereas if he's putting structures on it, that will change. So that makes sense. I was just thinking through the processes, sorry to get us off track.
But those are important considerations, and we can potentially. Write out a workflow for things like that, and of course, there aren't a lot of lots, but
Mhm.
you know, the same, we could look at the Albemarle process, so. You know, if Javier or myself or whoever is, you know, new to this, we could follow that process in the future.
Yeah.
And be more pool safe, I guess we would say.
I-
Gailson.
I have a question, sorry. Are any of these lots that are on the Fluvanna side, are they already developed or are they just zoned for development?
Most of these are in that steep area that aren't developed, so they're just vacant.
Okay.
You know, there's. Let me just zoom in here, Mr. Quick's lot here, the neighbor up above him, that did good comments during the public hearing. There's the laundromat down here at the bottom of the hill, so on and so forth. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we'll continue on with Fluvanna. I think our first meeting was really fruitful. About Albemarle County, so we haven't had a chance to really request a coordination meeting. I did meet the planning folks at the Walton Elementary engagement session. The planning director, he's the one that mentioned that they had already done a sidewalk study for Scottsville, and he's the one that suggested that he could send that to me, and he got my contact details. Never came. I sent 2 follow-up emails, never came. So that would be really useful. And he did mention that we might need to verify the information because it's about 4 years old, but you know, sidewalks don't move that fast, but we would verify it ourselves. Maybe one of the planning commissioners and I could just drive around and walk around and do that really quickly. Then, you know, we also want to provide feedback on the, you know, how the town is represented in EC 44. I'll have a few slides on that. Then, we might want to request clarification on how the town population is considered in AC 44. We talked about that. I've done a little bit more digging, and I found it's even more obvious than I thought it was. It's in the same document. Page 3 and 7 were used in different ways. So just to really recap, and this goes back to county coordination with Albemarle. If this is the direction everyone wants to head. Basically, you know, I took another look at this, and this goes back to urban development areas. So it says right here, Scottsville functionally has acted like an urban development area, or a development area at least. So here in the document, they basically say that we functionally acted like one. So I think the town could declare its own urban development area. And this was really another takeaway I got from the VDOT meeting. And so forth, even Fluvanna meeting, you know, they use urban development area to their own benefits. And that's really what I got from the VDOT meeting too. I asked twice. Finally, the planner said, yes, definitely leverage that. Because you can use urban development area for your grant applications, and it helps. So, really, we're talking about equitable access to groceries, healthcare, and other goods and services in this part of the county. I think that's really important. Okay, so just to recap, this is.
Question.
Uh-huh.
Can, the students, you talked about perhaps having UVA work on an economic development plan. Can they look at that equitable access, including with, goods and services?
Yes, I think so, but I don't think it'll be done anytime soon.
No, that's
because
okay, that's
we have
okay.
to Find the right professor.
Mhm.
I can work on that when school starts in later August. But find the right professor, then they have to locate the students and maybe they weave something into their class the following semester, so like January, February.
Okay. Okay,
And
very
let's say
good.
it takes the semester, so it might be done in May or June,
Mhm.
but I think that might be really useful.
Yeah,
Already the comp plan documents that the county is working on shows that, you know, the southern Albemarle County, you know, has, shorter lifespan, less educational outlook, so on and so forth. So I think an economic study of the area, not only Albemarle, but our northern part of Buckingham and Fluvanna, it really shows some insights. And position Scottsville more as a regional hub or leader here in this rural area.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If we were considered an economic,
Urban development
an
area.
urban development area. What would that, like, what would we have to do to be considered an urban development area?
Well, based on the Virginia code, we just need to justify why we are declaring ourselves an urban development area.
Okay,
So in my opinion, declaring the town as an urban development area would be relatively straightforward because we have large areas of housing that are up and coming.
okay,
Potentially being developed. Bird Street, we just heard is being developed now, practically. We have the northeast area of the town that's by right development, or it could become something more. So on and so forth. We've got, new gas station and other lots in that block up and coming. So I think it would be very, very straightforward. And the Virginia code is quite open-ended in terms of giving the town or any jurisdiction power to declare its own urban development area.
okay, thank you.
And the most important thing is, the town's population of 500, 550, those resources are not distributed over here in the growth, ring now. Because what has been done, basically they lumped the town of Scottsville's population in with the development areas, so it's about 64 to 65,000 people. But then in the map, they show us as a rural area, so I don't think that's fair. So they're basically taking Scottsville's population and lumping it in here. So that's, what is that? 1 out of 120th of that. But I think it's worthwhile to keep our piece of the pie down south. You could say it that way. So, like I said previously, this information I found it in different documents on their website within the AC 44 engagement, but now I've even found it on the same document, page 3 and page 7. So it's all there. It's big conflict. Here they count it as a rural area, but here they lump the population in with the development. So I think it's unfair. So just to show these images again, maybe Mayor, I don't know if you've seen this before, but in their engagement materials, they really highlight the resources of the town. For instance, the volunteer fire department inside town boundary. They don't mention the police department, but the police department of the town, does a lot of service calls in the region. And that's a lot of money, resources. Here we're talking about that rural area. The town's not even shown here, just the roads. And then here we're talking about crossroads communities, so on and so forth. They cover up Scottsville with a legend. This one makes me the most discouraged. But when I was looking around a couple days ago, I did find this new example. So here in that same batch of documents for AC 44, they have Scottsville as gray. So here it's a development area. So I'd have to say overall, there's like 4 different ways that Scottsville is shown at least.
Like whiplash.
Yeah, whiplash. And here you're looking here at this is housing density units built. But here Scottsville is its own territory, but because of the small area and the low number of houses up and coming. We look like we're, white, nothing's going on here, but I'd have to say that there's even less going on here in area 4, but that's just a nice medium blue, you know what I mean? So however, Scottsville is shown, it seems to be a disadvantage in many ways. Okay, so just to kind of condense all these ideas, I would really recommend that the town consider moving towards declaring an urban development area within this boundary. So I was thinking this afternoon, would this be 1 urban development area or 2? And the town's really in a unique situation, we're in 2 counties. So we might declare the whole area as 1 urban development area, or we could just still cover that same area and just declare 1 for Fluvanna and 1 for Albemarle.
But isn't the Fluvanna side already declared an urban development area?
Correct, but they're not allowed to do that without our permission.
Not by us.
But if we just said, hey, that's great, we're also gonna declare our portion of it an urban development area, then there wouldn't need to be the.
Yeah, so the planning director, we asked him, the question straight up.
Mhm.
And I don't have that slide in here, but you might remember the language, that they call this a community planning area and urban development area.
Right,
So they use both terms. So technically, they can't color within this boundary with their crayons unless we give them permission.
okay,
And again, what they're trying to do is justify their larger picture, you know what I mean? Just like Albemarle. Albemarle is trying to justify, their larger picture here.
right,
So that's why I think, I would recommend the town take back, the indication of resources that it does have power over. And, indicate, urban development areas. So for instance, they would take away their pink, and then we do our urban development area here. And then on the Albemarle County side, we do our urban development area, throughout there too.
so would that mean that Fluvanna then could not
Correct,
declare?
Yeah.
That it would just be, okay,
because it's very clear language in the Virginia code.
okay,
They have to request our permission to do this.
I gotcha, so it can't be
It
simultaneous,
can't be simultaneous.
okay. That makes more
And-
sense,
Let's say we're a small community like Gilwood, in Buckingham County. They don't even have their own comp plan. Ms. Carter told us that Gilwood was basically just kind of folded into the county comp plan because they're only a town of about 300 residents. They don't have enough resources even to do a document.
okay,
So Dillon, in that case, could say, hey, county, please incorporate us with any boundary you want,
okay,
and they'd be happy for it. But I think the town of Scottsville has more capacity and resources. I think we could use this for the betterment of the town.
okay, I didn't realize you couldn't have it. They couldn't also have their part of the county, their county,
Because it's all about resources.
right,
So basically what the county wants to do is take all those tax dollars and funnel all the money for drain improvements and curb improvements and so on and so forth in these blue areas.
mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the process of declaring yourself?
So we just need to write that into our comp plan.
Okay,
And we need to write down some simple justification. For that.
okay, and then what happens? You do the
Then the
comp
comp
plan,
plan goes to the town council and is approved.
right, but I
And we
meant
would
like,
inform the counties directly.
okay, so we just have to tell them we're doing this,
Yes,
okay,
and like I mentioned, which we, along this process, we just need to consult with them.
okay,
And like I said, let me go back to this terminology. We just have to show this text here and says, well, in your report, you already said that we function like a development area already. So why can't we be our own development area?
right, okay,
Yeah, and as it says there, we have jurisdiction over land use, of course, but we still rely on them for a lot of resources. Or should be.
So, yeah, this is really a demarcation, physical demarcation on resources, staking out assets. And in this term, urban development area is really counting population. And how that population equates to resources that are distributed. So as I mentioned on our last meeting on 24th of July, basically, you know, there's a certain number of resources for 550 people. And I guess in, let's say, subtract Fluvanna County residents of the town, let's say 500, just a round number. So 500 people, those resources are being funneled over here to make improvements in front of McDonald's on Highway 29, so on and so forth. I know that 500 people's resources are not a large number out of 64,000, but it is a significant portion, I think. And that would make the county really consider twice, you know, about showing, they didn't have to for sure show the town, in more maps. They can't shy away from that. Even though I think no matter what, they should show an incorporated town boundary here, no matter what, even if they color inside or outside. Anyway, so that's my recommendation. If this would be okay, we can work towards that in the comp plan and write it in. And of course, it's a gradual process. We're not going to do it all in 1 month, but if we work towards that, I think it would be achievable and within the rights of town. And next meeting, I'll bring up on a slide the exact language that's in the Virginia code, and we can check those requirements on. Okay, so next steps. I'm proposing a discussion during the week of August 14th. So ideally, this would be 2 commissioners and 2 councilors and any interested community members. I know Commissioner Caltabiano, you were recommending a few community members get involved. So I know Nancy Gill already attended the meeting we had on 24th of July. So I think in these discussions, the more the merrier, as long as we don't have a quorum, of course. So what I suggest we focus on in this discussion would be workshopping those individual principles and goals. So maybe we start with those 3 underlying principles, you know, stewardship, character, and growth. And we really sit down and we start to kind of outline, maybe bullet point form, what are the most important aspects of those for the town and how they relate to the fiscal assets of the town. And then at that discussion, we can also have a better picture of these other text box, like the assets, like we need to write a few paragraphs on such and such that we don't have in content right now. We can start highlighting those, and people that are interested start writing those paragraphs. I think that'll be really fruitful. So we start multiple authors working, and then we bring it together. Okay, so then the comp plan meeting on the planning commission meeting on September 5th. I believe this will be the Tuesday meeting since Monday is a Labor Day. We'll look at the final analysis of the survey results and make the call if the survey needs to be closed. We'll check on the engagement activities. Hopefully some commissioners will have had a chance to go through a few engagement activities. So we can go through the feedback synopsis of each of those events and see how it's been going, and do we need to change strategy there, or do we just keep on going to more events? We need to hit up the farmers market more often, and so on and so forth. And then we really take these principles and goals that we started to like frame out here, text there, and we really have maybe 1 or 2 fleshed out. And we see that we could call it the trial principle, and see how it's fleshed out. And if it's going well, then we implement that same way throughout those 3 principles and 4 goals, if those are the ways you want to go. And then I think this would be a great time to talk about this hotel study that's been done or being finalized for the town, and how that factors into the comp plan. And then you know, of course, at that meeting, we can give an update on any ongoing consultations, but we really need to, you know, focus on interacting with the county. Maybe that VDOT, monthly meeting might be the great, catalyst for that we talked about, the monthly meeting with VDOT and county staff. They said we could join. Flavanna follow-up meeting, and then Virginia Housing. So what I did, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Virginia Housing, but they're a state agency focusing on housing financing. So I met them at this planning conference that I went to in the middle of July. Since the Thomas Jefferson discussion on housing assistance wasn't really fruitful, not really possible yet. This organization is a potential to come talk to us. They are based in Richmond, but they sent me an email earlier today. They want to talk more. They did refer to when I mentioned housing to them in an email, they did refer us to a housing study done for the tire factory. But I don't think we're really looking specifically at the tire factory. I'm thinking we're looking more generally. So what's funny is when I met them at this conference, there were 3 of their staff members at this conference at a booth. And I mentioned Scottsville, and they immediately said tire factory. So you're known in Richmond as the tire factory town. But I think that's good. I mean, Scottsville is a relatively small community in the whole Virginia scope of things. But it does have some name recognition. But I do think that we're probably looking at things more holistically than just tire factory. We're looking at it more broadly, housing, affordability, demographics. So that's why I think we can still try to leverage some information. Maybe they can come, like I said, for a 30-minute presentation and a 30-minute Q&A. And even having that basis, a common understanding amongst different parties might be good to bring the conversation forward.
What is the
HGA.
Can you help develop authority?
They're a different group because they focus more on financing. I think the Virginia Department of Housing, they focus on more affordability, what we would call public housing. This is more trying to leverage different partnerships with developers or community development corporations. So for instance, I was just emailing with Javier and Ms. Morse last night that I found out that there's a Flavanna-Louisa Housing Foundation. So this Flavanna-Louisa Housing Foundation focuses on promoting affordable housing, building affordable housing in Flavanna and Louisa counties. So I thought, wow, part of the town is in Flavanna. They service at least a portion of our town. Who we talked to them. I know there was previously mentioned here in our meeting about why couldn't the town become its own housing developer? Well, that's one possibility, and Virginia Housing could maybe help us with financing or different, possibilities. That's a lot of work though. But could we partner with Flavanna-Louisa Housing Foundation, and maybe they could be an intermediary? Don't know. Yeah. And the reason I saw this is because there's a newsletter that goes around for different county updates. And I saw that foundation had applied for planning approval in Louisa County. So it's like, wow, if they're building something in Louisa County, why can't they build something here in the Scottsville portion of Flavanna County? Just a possibility. Yeah. I think we have to look at these different opportunities in the long term.
Thank you. I like that idea. Yeah.
So that's the end of the presentation. Glad to go back and talk about different aspects. Thank you.
So question about number 1, next steps. So workshopping individual principals' goals, that could be big. So how would you imagine that being one meeting or multiple meetings?
It would be big and multiple meetings. So I think the first, whoever's at that discussion in the first 5 minutes, we have to talk about the comp plan process, because maybe from someone from Stevie comes, she's not familiar with the process. I could get everyone kind of on the same page. Then we introduce this structure, if this is how everyone wants to move forward. And then we really start tackling one of these, like retaining character. So this is probably the easiest, I think, to start off with. So what I've done is gone through the existing comp plan document. I love going through PDFs because you can word search, right? So I think it was 43 times that character shows up. So character shows up as it's retaining character, it shows up about small town character, historic characters, all these different types of characters, adjectives added on to character. So we kind of take a look at that, what's in the existing document, and we can get a kind of a sense around the table of what are we really wanting to focus on when we talk about character? Is it all those things, or is it really talking about one singular idea?
So I guess where I'm going with this is whoever participates in the group next week, would you want continuity if there were follow-up meetings or?
Well, I think it'll be fruitful for whoever's at this meeting, like 3 planning commissioners, 2 of them to join, because you're familiar with this whole process that I laid out and proposing. So I'd be glad with, Mr. Johnson and Ms. Strassman to join again. I think our meeting is extremely fruitful.
Yeah, awesome, thank
Yeah.
you.
And
I can make suggestions on the community members from that list there, Laura Malusi, Stuart Munson, Zach Bullock, Josh Peck.
so maybe what I could do, I can just email them all. And
See who's available next week at a
Yeah.
time that works for everybody.
Yeah, what about Deja?
Deja, oh, that's a great idea. She's so busy. I hope.
I
I
know,
hope
she's
she
on like
could-
18 boards.
Yeah,
but-
she is, but her input would be great too.
Javier, do you have the emails for all of those folks? I think I have everyone on that list right now.
Yeah, good.
So I can forward that to him. Write it on my to-do list.
I think we should get the like Chamber of Commerce involved in this stuff too.
Email
Yeah,
the chamber president maybe.
Yeah. yes, I
Um,
think so.
Maybe somebody from the board
Yeah,
would be
or,
there.
or even any, I mean, Deja is a business owner too, but like any more of the business
Mm-hmm.
owners.
And again, we don't want to have a huge crowd, but.
Right.
On a, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, some people might not be available, but if we can get, last meeting we had 3 plus me. We get 5 plus me, I think that'd be a nice size.
Mhm.
Nancy Gill had a lot of great insights, especially about the history of the town. Yeah, and we can just talk about character, and you don't really have to know a lot about the bigger context of the comp plan, we can just have these focused conversations. And maybe we get through character and stewardship in that meeting, I think. And again, these are just bullet points and, brief phrases, and maybe someone at the meeting has a lot of interest in character.
Well, I was just thinking, maybe we should target, so if it's character, then maybe we want somebody from the ARB. And then if, for enabling growth, maybe that's when we contact the Chamber of Commerce and ask them if they can send a rep and then get another one of the business owners to come. So, yeah, if we're gonna, if these are gonna be 3 different meetings. Potentially,
I think that's excellent, yeah. Yeah, so maybe we could structure this as 3 different meetings. But we wouldn't only talk about one, let's say we talk
Right.
about 1.5. So we start talking about character, and then we might really cover the other 2. In a little bit, mainly talking about how does character relate to the other. Okay,
right,
so then we talk, the next meeting would focus on stewardship and really how does it relate to character and growth. And then once, after those 3 sit-down discussions. Then. In theory, we try to move a little bit faster, but we talk about. Maybe goal 1 and 2 in one meeting, and then goal 3 and 4 in another meeting.
Mhm.
I think that would be. Very manageable. And. I think it'll be much faster, once we have this underlying basis of principles done, then we can talk about infrastructure, we can talk about housing. We can talk about community connections, and then. If fiscal well-being, so on and so forth, I think it'll start to flow faster.
It would be nice to have Charlie Armstrong in some of those meetings too, about housing choices and growth. Since they're gonna be a big part of the community, I think it would be good to get them involved.
And even Southern Development, you know, we could engage with them and, they could get very involved. If they wanted to be,
Right.
and they could understand our process, through that engagement and, maybe they are really excited to develop, but they hold off until a little bit later. And not start by like. Because, I mean, I'm willing to talk to anybody, any stakeholders in town, whether it's Southern Development or Nancy Gill or, you know, business owners, so on. I think we can be open and inclusive as much as possible. So I think these are great, ideas, chamber, we really focus on having representative for the growth discussion, and also business owners, ARB for character. We reference them, and Charlie Armstrong for housing. And we'll look for other connections just like that.
I guess my only concern about Southern is, I mean, they just don't have affordable options. I mean. They,
But we don't even have a definition for affordable from the county.
well, and
Or the
what's
state.
our definition? Yeah, but I mean, based upon, you could tell us from our survey results, what are people calling affordable? Do we have a number right now that people are picking?
I
For-
didn't get that in depth there.
Well, I mean, you could have Southern there, but you could also invite somebody from Piedmont Housing Alliance. Or Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah, I just think that Southern, yeah, I want them to have a seat at the table because they're our biggest stakeholder in the community right now, but I also don't want us to think that they're the only option on affordability, because we have to
Right.
think outside of them.
Yeah.
I know that they're not gonna be affordable for most of the people that are looking for affordable housing right now.
Right. No, I was thinking more for just like enabling growth.
Mm-hmm. Infrastructure for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, just different ideas for that.
Yeah, but I mean, if a stakeholder started to understand that the town was looking at really enabling growth. They could, you know, focus on what they want to develop and then allow space for other types of housing.
Yeah. I mean, you could even have somebody from, I mean, we need medical services out here, so. Maybe Nancy would be a great contact because she's part of here. So yeah, how do we,
Well, and also how much of this should be informed by our focus groups that we're gonna have? So all the people that we're mentioning right now, I wanna see those people at our focus groups too. So where's the line? I don't wanna.
Yeah.
Should we be doing focus groups before we do this, or?
Well, in theory, we have all of our community engagement before and then do this after. But this is a relatively long process, and community engagement is also a relatively long process. So we actually have to kind of work on it in parallel.
Mhm.
So, and then in parallel, it sits conversations both ways.
Mhm.
Because sometimes you have. Sometimes discussions too open-ended don't really nail down this large holistic thought of 20 years out.
Mhm.
So maybe we find out that. You know, the feedback for affordable housing's mainly targeted at retirees, the elderly,
right,
potentially. So we're like, oh, okay, we maybe we don't focus as much on working adults and families, we focus more on retiring housing. That could be one way that we learn from the survey and engagement, and that steers us in a certain direction here. That's just one example. I'm not sure if that's going to be actually practical, but that's could happen in different regards.
So how many interested community members do you want?
I think he was saying about two.
Two?
right?
Okay,
Two planning commissioners, 2 town councilors and 2 community members.
Okay.
6 would be a nice mix.
okay, so you've got some ideas on who, just see what you can do to get 2 of them, and then I think the other steps are excellent. But then what about the focus groups? Let's start planning those, coming up with dates, coming up with some structure on that. Do you want to? How should we plan that?
Okay, so let me go to the community engagement. Okay, so these are
yeah,
what I'm
that.
referring to as outreach or listening events. These are kind of pop-up events, we call them. So these, are you referring to these as focus groups, or focus groups like more sit down?
Yeah, you're right. This has to come first. I was actually thinking about when we get the feedback there and then bring it in and fine tune it.
Yeah, so that could be termed as a focus group, where we bring like-minded stakeholders, not like-minded, but people from similar backgrounds. Or we could call that like a community engagement workshop, where we have 5 different stations around, and everyone kind of cycles around each station. And let's say this is station 1, we're talking about nature trails and parks, the properties of the town. So we have 1 planning commissioner and 1 town councilor sharing about what the town has right now, some ideas, how improvements can be made. We're also talking about maintenance. So I could imagine Mr. Heison's standing there, and maybe, planning commission right over there. And sharing these stories, but also getting feedback. So once people are here for 10 minutes talking about parks and the nature trails and the different natural assets of the town, then they cycle on to station number 2. Maybe 2 is talking about housing, for instance. So that could be more of a workshop setting, like a science fair setting. But if you want to go more focus group setting, that would be more people sitting and, we asking questions. What do you think about affordable housing when you hear that term? What is that?
So I might have jumped the gun a little bit, because we should probably do this first.
Yeah, so the idea is, ideally, we get the initial engagement here, we read between the lines, between the survey.
Right.
Start to kind of build our own understanding of the situation. So you might have thought that, something was needed, but what you're actually hearing from communities like, oh, this is actually the opposite of what I was thinking. So we need to course correct, we discuss here. And then, is this so important that we need to actually sit down with people and get a more formalized opinion on the situation? You know what I mean? So that would be a focus group. But focus groups, I do have to highlight, they do take a lot of time and energy. For instance, you have to gather, a focus group could be 6 to 8 people. You have to have a list of questions to ask them, and you have to kind of write down the responses and kind of analyze that information. It's a little bit more work than this type.
So you think one or the other?
I would suggest that we focus on these first until the next planning commission meeting. We see how the first few of these go. Let's say someone goes to a farmer's market. Let's say someone goes to a soccer game, and someone goes to Yancey, for instance, and then we hear from those planning commissioners how the event went and what they heard. And if we think that type of feedback is really fruitful, we can continue with that. And what we do, I can create a sheet that it's basically a 1-pager where you have, what type of people did you meet? And you just fill in the bullet points. What did you learn from these people? And next action.
Yeah, well, immediately, we know we're going to have to hash out the balance between growth and services and infrastructure and growth. So we know we're gonna get a variety of opinions, many of which we've already heard. So getting the opinions again will, probably reiterate some of what we've heard and maybe give us a count of how many people want this and how many people want that. But we're still gonna have 2 very different points of view that we need to come up with a balance for our comp plan. So what do we do?
So typically what would happen, and I mean, Albemarle County is a perfect example, they collect a bunch of information from different events. And then they write up a synopsis, a summary, and they say, these are the main things that we're hearing. And based on the synopsis, this is what we recommend moving forward in the conference.
So like majority rules?
You know, it can be written in many ways, but you can say, here's what the majority is saying, but also it's important that the town look out for the minority in this regard, or we think this is happening, but we're not hearing a lot from these people because they're not able to attend our events because they're working.
But we're always, here's what's gonna happen. We know this is what's gonna happen. Everyone's going to have differing opinions on development. It'll run the gamut, but everyone's gonna want more services. Everyone wants the sidewalks, they want the infrastructure, they want the services. We can't afford all of that if we only have one side of growth, which is the low end of growth. So how do we come up right? So is that for us to hash out, or is that something that we could really get more consensus on in a focus group? Because remember, we talked about that diagram where you've got, you know, the little slide and the picture will change and show you, well, this is what you know where I'm going.
Yeah,
I see your point now.
what is the structure for these outreach events? I think that's what I was trying to get to earlier. It's like, are they 1 to 2 hour? You ask a specific set of questions to people as they come up to the booth or the table? What are we doing with this?
So I think that goes back to the question prompts that I think are really important.
Right.
So it depends on what type of event that you're going to. So for instance, like the soccer game. Those people at soccer game are probably geared towards families, right? And they're gonna look at certain things like housing for families. So we could talk about more specific questions for them. And how their lives relate to the comp plan. But again, these are general questions and getting general feedback.
Right.
So I totally understand Commissioner Caltabiano, your point about wanting some very specific and targeted feedback that can be used to justify the recommendations in the comp plan. So I would agree, if you want very targeted feedback to be able to make very strong recommendations, I think the focus group would be the way to go. So we have people here, we have asked them very structured questions, saying if you had a trade-off between more affordable housing or sidewalks, in terms of, you know, town finances, what would you want to focus on? We ask very specific questions on it, and if we get a response, oh, let's focus on sidewalks, then that would tilt everything towards creating community connections.
So could you have a mix of, like, if we had something set up here, you could have that map, and you could have a couple of stations set up, and then you could move into more of a focus group type of
Yes,
setting.
that, I guess you could call that more of a hybrid.
Right.
The benefit of that would be that they engage in these small groups, they kind of act as icebreakers. They get warmed up, they get a little bit informed, okay, now I understand what's kind of going on here. Then the second half, we sit down in the actual focus group session, we could get much more thorough and worthwhile feedback, genuine feedback, I guess, it's more better informed feedback. So that could be really fruitful. It would take a little bit more work because you guys do focus questions, and you also have to kind of strategize these events around the room. Maybe we do 3 of them, 3 different stations. Maybe, you know, somehow the station numbers relate to either these 3 things or these 4 things, or combinations of them. But I think that would be really an awesome event if we we're able to strategize and get that prepared. And
But, go ahead, that's a much larger scope also, what you're asking for there.
Well, it's more focused. Oh, right,
Yeah.
time commitment, yeah.
Just from doing a focus group and then doing community outreach, I'm just being
Well,
clear about that.
I was thinking instead of doing this. Instead of doing all of these different things, because basically, I think. The impression I'm coming away with for this, for the outreach, is that we're basically. Having an oral survey.
correct, so what planning commission could do is take all that energy and going to individual events. And all that, traveling and scheduling and condense all that process and work into. One or two or three really worthwhile events here.
Right. Or at the library, like we could use the community room at the library. Or we could use the community, like the gym at the Boys and Girls Club. Like we could be very, strategic about,
Going to the people, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this is an awesome discussion because you got me thinking, the comp plan, of course, I wasn't involved in the existing comp plan process. But to my recollection, there's not really a strong sense of recommendation here based on information and data.
right,
It's just people, from my knowledge, sitting around saying, oh, the town needs to conserve its natural resources. The town needs to focus on, growth, but there's not really an underlying justification. If we were able to do very targeted sessions, like
Yeah.
we just talked about, and have that basis, I think if we took that and involved town council in that process, it would really help the approval of the comp plan, because
right,
not only was it planning commission doing this event, but also was hopefully together with town council, so the town councilors and planning commissioners are hearing the same thing, so when town council is needing to approve the document, and they're like, yeah, well, we heard about this too, we were involved in the process. This is pretty straightforward, this makes sense, let's push this forward.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we can still do some of these, like, I think the farmer's market and like the soccer games. Maybe we have a booth there just saying, hey, we're updating the comp plan, we want you to participate. Here are we're gonna have these events coming up that are these, more focused groups. Here are the dates, please join us, here's our survey link, please help us, give us the information that we need to make this,
Yeah, so it's,
reflect how you feel about what we should be doing as a town.
yep, tilting more towards outreach.
Right.
A little bit less focus on listening.
Right, cause I'm imagining getting stuck in a 1 hour long conversation with,
That could happen.
somebody down at the farmer's market, and then 80 people walk by me that I could have been giving a flyer out to and saying, hey, please fill out our survey, please come to our events.
Yep.
So I just don't know if that's very useful.
I think this is a great discussion and it's really adjusting course. Because I think I totally agree that what you're saying is you're thinking you're gonna hear about the same stuff you already have heard
Right,
and you might already know most of it. So how can we get better focused feedback that's more able to justify the decisions in the comp plan and the recommendation of the comp plan? So I think that combination of starting off with the science fair and then the second half of the session is really sit down.
right,
That could be really useful.
and
So-
maybe we have I don't know, some drinks, pizza, I don't know. Some donuts, something to keep people engaged. We could do it, on a Saturday morning. Down by the farmer's market,
Yeah.
pull people in. I don't know.
I think it's good that we're working on this in parallel because if we just do our community engagement in the beginning. Separate from this process of thinking about the different aspects of the plan. It would be a little bit disengaged, there wouldn't be a feedback loop. So I think it's really fruitful, we continue. Having these types of discussions. But in parallel, we have discussions with the focus group, and then they feed to each other.
Mhm.
So like, we could talk about the first. Topic of, we could call it a science fair / focus group. I think, housing could be the most important, but we might not be waiting, we might not have the right terminology at hand, I think we need another. Planning commission meeting to talk about this, and even we can get external help. Like I mentioned for Virginia Housing maybe. But we could start the first of this discussion we could have could be on walkability, I think that's. Crowd pleaser. All we had to do is create the sidewalk study the county was gonna provide us, but I think we can pretty quickly do that. And we can, I can produce another map of that size, and I've seen it done, you have an aerial map, like a Google Earth map, and you ask people to put stickers. Where do you encounter problems when you're walking around Scottsville? That's a really simple exercise. So of course, they're gonna know their community areas, and like, let's say you live in Fluvanna County, you're gonna know that area mostly. If you have 8 to 10 to 12 people, that you're gonna get pretty good coverage around town of problem areas, and we can reuse that same map in other discussions.
Yep.
So, and then what we can do is, once we use that map in a few discussions, we can take a picture of it or scan it. And we actually put it in the comp plan and say. The feedback was that people really want to get from downtown to uptown. Maybe that's the outcome, and then the town should prioritize creating that sidewalk connection. It might not be possible along Valley Street, but maybe it's possible on one of the side streets to the west of Valley.
Yeah.
And the town should focus on this in the next 15 years. They should factor it into the capital improvement plan. Remember, that's a document that's required by the state of Virginia. We have to chart out what infrastructure expenses are needed in the next 15 years. And then the town constructed plan, wow, we're supposed to build 1/2 mile of sidewalks in the next 15 years. How are we gonna pay for that?
Yeah.
Are we gonna do it by grants, or are we gonna do a real estate tax? Or we're gonna do 200 feet every year, and whatever that equals out. So I think that's really truly the long-term planning process.
Right.
And that's how community engagement can impact that and justify it.
That's
So-
a really good station. I like that idea. Let's remember that.
I have a perfect example to show you, but it's on my computer, and this is not linked to that, so next time I can show you, but in our discussion next week, hopefully whoever attends, I'll show that. Okay, so if that's the guidance, we can definitely kind of adjust course and do the science fair / focus group.
I think it would be helpful to have the survey open this month and next month. And then we do the focus groups and these bigger meetings the month of October. I think we have 2 or 3 of them. We have maybe one on a weeknight, we have one on a weekend. Couple on a weekend, I don't know,
And
one during the day.
so less of listening, more of outreach. We're probably not gonna have dates lined up when we're doing these, but the focus should be.
I think we should, I think via email this week, let's get the date set up so that we can have, like, when we go to the farmer's market, and I think somebody should be there, 1 or 2 of us should be there on shifts every weekend. Going out to the Scottsville Library, going to the Yancey Community Center events and handing out information, the QR code for the survey and the dates for our, I think we need to get this stuff lined up.
We could put the dates on the website or somehow attach it to the QR code so it comes up.
Yeah,
Is
The
that-
website's implementing very soon?
Yeah, so live the 21st, and we'll be doing a final phase 14th, so next Monday. Flies. So we have that on mind among other things with them to have it included on there.
Okay,
You can always make a different flyer or poster to include that stuff as we kind of work through the process.
right,
Think if we do it in shifts and divide the work between council members, it's very doable. With that outreach and once you set up the materials, just handing it to the next person.
right,
You know, a little rolling card, I've always thought of it with a few of those things, or
right.
a canvas mat with
Well, if it,
various things.
and if it's just a matter of passing out the QR code and talking to people about the importance of attending and participating, then they don't have to be commissioners or counselors. They could be just anyone who's
Mhm.
interested in being helpful.
Yep,
So maybe leveraging some of the volunteers you had mentioned, for focus group also, that might be a volunteer opportunity, if they feel engaged with that.
I just thought, I mean, one of the reasons why we wanted to do it this way is listening is to get more feedback so that we can really structure the focus group parts of it. So let's just make sure that we're getting enough information that we, whether it's through the survey or through whatever listening we're doing, so that we can really make sure we have meaningful topics to discuss in the focus groups.
But I think the
great.
first focus group, we could really focus on walkability. I think that'd be the easiest. Walkability. Then the second would be housing.
I mean, the focus groups could be the principals.
Well, and I mean, I almost wonder if the results of the survey will
Right.
tell us what the
Yeah.
focus group should be on, because that's where people are identifying the issues that are of concern to them.
Yeah,
Yeah. What I can do tomorrow, I can export the feedback so far in Excel format and email it around. I think some summary.
That's why it's kind of hard to figure out what we're gonna be talking about when in the focus groups, because that's, if we're leaving the survey open for August and September, then we don't really know what focus groups we're gonna have. I mean, I guess we have an idea because we know what issues the community has, but
well, but you still, I mean, we can still come up with dates. We might not have the topics,
Mhm,
but we can at
mhm.
least say these are gonna be the dates and whoever can participate, can participate.
I'm just gonna log in the survey monkey right now, and we can look live.
To get going.
yeah, but in
Sorry.
Lincoln, I'm
10 to
concerned about
10.
your.
I'm hoping Nicola's chickens are still alive. Fox likes to come by.
No.
Do your two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
Can we, instead of doing that, can we move that to email?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Um. Can we get a spreadsheet, a sign up list where people can, because we still need to do these, events like this. This is what you won your reward for, so we definitely have to make sure we're doing this.
We have the idea of listing groups and then also focus group kind of format.
Listening, outreach, listening events, understanding that there's only so much listening you can do when you're really
Right.
trying to get the word out and,
Focus.
Mhm.
Okay.
yes.
And then on both of those, we can do both of those, we can do signups.
Yeah.
And keep in consideration how we folded those volunteers
It-
in two different ways.
And when you say signups, do you mean like having an email sign up list where people can stay informed?
People signing up either to do the first element, which feels like you could pass it along. to all.
Gotcha.
And then the second element, well, both elements I think would benefit from participation of planning commissioners.
Mhm,
So, and then through that, would be,
mhm.
helpful.
Can we either do a small group to prepare for these outreach events? And what we want at the table and what we want, the instructions and the prompts that we want people to use. Or can we? I mean, I feel like a small group is good for that,
Yeah,
You
I
mean
think
like,
maybe just
two people.
maybe two
Yeah.
people meeting with me and doing a little bit of planning. I already wrote down things that I think I can help out with. Essentially printing out and writing up.
Okay, good.
But then, hey, these are the things together, and then maybe either dividing it, if it becomes a little bit out of my scope, or just having more than one person understanding cadence or what we're gonna do on both of these events. The first one should be easier, it's a little bit more straightforward. The second one's a little bit more work, like it said. The focus group.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Each events.
Okay, so I mean, I can do that. You wanna do Zoom someday this week?
Yeah. Do you want to just through email?
Yeah.
So since I explored the results earlier today, we've had 4 responses. Those are probably from Nancy Gill's newsletter that went out. Yeah, I can send this around by email.
Can you send it to us weekly or is that overkill? Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
I can send it around weekly.
I mean-
As long as we get more responses, yeah. We'll
Yeah.
keep this rolling.
I'd stretch it out so you get a bigger.
Okay,
result.
yeah, and I also don't want us to feel like we need to be pushing an agenda or anything like that, so I don't want it to come off that way.
And I think the survey will be an element, but not the totality of the work we're doing here.
Mm-hmm,
I think,
yeah,
so I think the final portion of it will be useful for that feedback loop. But also, we have multiple ways we're approaching this, so I wouldn't put too much. I would think of it as part of the recipe rather than the whole plate.
mhm,
So what's surprising is small affordable single family homes is the most
Mhm.
popular, yeah.
and senior living.
Senior living, yeah, pretty strong.
And look at how
And
few for
condos and
townhomes,
apartments.
which is what we have going in.
what do you mean townhomes?
Well, this townhomes also included, multifamily housing and duplexes that we simplified down the townhome.
Oh, we don't have that one in.
Bird.
Those are,
Thank you so much for being here.
those are, I was considered single family.
Affordable housing, yes, 60%
Well, they are
say have
townhomes,
affordable housing.
but they are single family
70%
homes too,
no.
that's why it's confusing.
They're gonna be like together?
Mhm.
So
I thought
that's,
they were gonna be
Well, we
But-
have,
bungalow
that's
style.
interesting.
well, we have two
But people
sets,
skip that.
don't we?
Hmm.
Are there two places where they're townhome?
I don't think so.
Oh, really? Am I losing my mind?
I don't remember that.
Okay, all right,
I thought they were all
I
gonna
take
be,
that back. I'm gonna go have my head checked.
I don't know, yeah, maybe I need to have my
I
head
think
checked
what's
too now.
useful here is no one ranked
go.
town.
All right,
townhomes
I really-
yeah, no, I don't blame you.
Health are important. But seeing small affordable family houses 14 times. That's
Well,
Okay, so here's, let's see, town income. So 10 people wrote down additional options for revenue sources, that would be interesting to analyze.
You're allowed to.
Town real estate tax 60%.
Wow.
Wow,
Really?
damn.
yeah.
All right.
But those are the
That's-
same people that want affordable housing.
Yeah, but only 7% do not support additional revenue sources. This is really amazing. Wow.
These are probably people who care about the town though, who
Mhm.
filled out our survey so far.
Well, those are the people who we want to hear from, the people who care about the town.
82% moderate growth. Wow,
Hmm.
that is amazing. That's a clear mandate there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, I have to get going.
Do we have to adjourn before we lose quorum?
Yeah,
Well,
We're gonna. Forum, so maybe.
okay.
okay,
Yeah.
all right,
Can
so can we, do we have a,
I make a
Motion,
motion to
thank
adjourn the meeting.
I second that motion.
all in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Okay, bye. Now that you leave, we can go back to the
Thank
survey.
you.
'cause it's
Sorry,
No longer a
sorry,
meeting
sorry.
if you're gone.
I'm very anxious.
I hope everyone's okay.
Thanks, me too.
Bye.
Right, bye guys.
Well, that was really. With it, thanks for being such a trooper. You've been great through this meeting. Are you tired and want to go home? Me too.